Do you think the Shi'a belong in the X-Men universe or not?
Well, I created them in the X-Men universe.
Okay.
They've been a major supporting cast ever since Lalandra beamed into into Charlie's life when he was at Misty and Colleen's. So that's at least a quarter of a century, if not 30 years. Oh, sorry. Time just caught up with me. Why not?
Well, the argument is that the Shi'a.
Some of us are anal, I know. It's
So they take the X-Men off of Earth too much, and give them, and so they're not concentrating on human affairs.
I mean, the way I look at it is, take Manhattan, or Chicago even. The Marvel Universe is the equivalent of one room in one small apartment in the Sears Tower. That's where all the Marvel heroes are dealing with. Exiles has everything else. So, it's a different sense of perspective. I've totally lost you, haven't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, see. I used to have a sense of humor. I used to be good at this. The point is that you have a dozen X-Men books, 100 or so active mutants, depending on which side of the House of M you're standing, House of M issues you're standing on, and telling the stories. Sometimes the writers want to go off Earth, sometimes they don't. You follow the writer's instinct, the editor's instinct. At the moment, they've got this whole storyline involving, what is it, the 12th or 13th Summers brother? 27th, 29th, 106th? How many of them are there? I used to have a sense of humor. This is so disconcerting. Maybe I should just sign comics. I don't know. They have to fit them somewhere, and it's up to the editors to decide whether or not the writer has a good idea and run with it. And obviously, the editors and Axel and the other guys thought that this is a good idea, and they're running with it. And this year they're doing one arc is off-world, next year it won't be. That's the nature of writing. You follow your instincts and try and do what you think is best. Obviously they are. But that's mainstream, and that's the core Marvel comics universe of stories. And at the risk of flogging was undoubtedly a dead horse, Exiles doesn't have much connection with that. Because, as I said, facetiously then, but seriously now, figure it as the Marvel Universe is basically Chicago. These are stories that take place there. But Chicago is within a much wider spectrum of Illinois, the United States. Exiles is a global FBI. They're trying to keep the peace everywhere. And sometimes it'll happen, something will go wrong in New York, sometimes something will go wrong in Santa Fe or Los Angeles or Sao Paulo or Rwanda. They go where they're needed, whether it's here, there, or everywhere. And the difference is that in the Marvel Universe, you've got a couple of hundred heroes to deal with the events on one world. In Exiles, you've got 8 gifted but overtaxed heroes trying to keep things together in every dimension imaginable. So they're having a lot of fun, but it's stressful. And of course, you should read it. Okay, anyone else? Yeah.
Man.
No, I'm the one who has
Okay, I'm
a non-functional intellect.
How could you let Storm get married to the Black Panther?
Like I had any control over it? One, I don't write the X-Men anymore.
Yeah.
Two, I'm not editorial director anymore. So I am but another contract employee, a writer, and this was a decision made by, in the age-old term, higher authority, i.e. Joe. You know, it seemed like a great idea at the time, I assume. Evidently,
Just miss Storm of the Mohawk.
well, as a reader, my personal reaction is I don't want to see her as anybody's second banana. I don't care if it's the Panther or Reed Richards. Storm is a lead. Storm, if the book were Storm and T'Challa, or Storm and the Black Panther, maybe. If she had her own series, Storm, that would be cool. But to make it the Black Panther and she's not even on the cover as a title character, so she's just.
Is she probably a Skrull anyway?
God, I hope so.
What?
She's probably just a Skrull anyway.
What have the Skrulls got to do with it?
It's a storyline they're thinking of having where they revealed that a lot of people especially superheroes, were secretly Skrulls.
Everyone's.
So what happened to the superheroes?
They don't know.
You mean they never existed?
No, they've been put into it.
No, they're in suspended animation designers.
I think that this is how they came up with to get rid of the Peter Parker supposed secret identity thing.
The Peter Parker what? No, I thought he cut a deal. Didn't he cut a deal with the devil?
Yeah, because
Cool. I mean, so I guess maybe she's a Skrull or he's a Skrull or whatever, and then they can jump up and say, oh, they're not really married because it was a Skrull. I mean, it worked. It's not like we haven't tried it before with
Storm's wife and
Johnny Storm's wife. Yeah, what's her face? Skrullhead. Of course, they had kids. But see, that's the other problem. That's the other problem with T'Challa and Aurora getting married, because, like it or not, when you are a royal head of state, there's only one purpose for getting married. That's to guarantee there is a next generation. So, if T'Challa then announces he's gotten married, if he and Storm get married, the amount of pressure on them both to produce an offspring is, in traditional monarchist context, should be irresistible. I mean, it's such that the pressure of being a royal and of generating offspring has driven the Empress of Japan crazy, and I believe sadly her daughter-in-law. You know, they just can't handle the strain. So one has to assume at some point in the future, Aurora, to carry this to its logical conclusion, ought to get pregnant. At which point, she's pretty much had it as a character. I mean, she then turns into Sue Richards, which may or may not be a bad thing. I mean, Sue has a lot of action, but you keep having to balance that and the fact that she's looking after at least one, possibly two kids, which, if there's anyone here who is in that position, is something of a challenge, even without being a superhero. But as I said, this is all idle speculation from somebody sitting in the bleachers, since these relate to characters and books over which I have, at this point, no influence. I mean, I wouldn't mind, but I don't. Exiles, on the other hand, is totally open territory. We can do anything. Or Gen X, where you get to see the offspring of characters in Colossus's grandson, for example. Remy and Rogue's son, Olivier. Possibly Storm's daughter, by a father who might be from the Savage Land. What happened there? We can't tell Namor. Not Namor, sorry. We can't tell T'Challa, and we won't.
So is this part of MC2 or no? The Spider-Girl universe. Gen Next.
No. It has nothing to do with the Spider-Girl universe. It would be nice, but no. This is Gen X is actually a non-sequel sequel to X-Men: The End. In terms of it basically, the kids. If we showed a shot of the globe in X-Men: The End, you would see all of these kids. They'd just be 8 years younger. As a matter of fact, you did see Remy in X-Men: The End. He was a major character, but he was 12, and his powers hadn't kicked in yet. Now he's 18, his powers have kicked in, he's part of the X-Men. If we had in Gen X given you an aerial view of Salem, of the mansion, you would see a big hole in the ground filled with water at this point, where the old mansion in Breakstone Lake used to be. But one of the emotional sub-elements of the series, both in the first arc and we just got the approval for a second arc, which hopefully will be on sale by the end of the year. So if that does well, if the first arc fulfills our expectations and the second arc does well, we might have a series. Holy goodness. But the point is that there is a shot in the third issue, I think it's the third issue, one of the upcoming issues, where you'll see a photograph of Scott's office as head of the Institute, the Xavier Institute. And on one wall is the Wall of the Dead. And there are all the members of the faculty and student body who have unfortunately died, most of them during X-Men: The End. And he has them up there partly because he's just a masochist, but partly to remind him of the consequences of letting kids do this job, it's a reminder to him not to follow Charles's footsteps and put children at risk. Beast, of course, knows better. It's like, we never did that. We never did foolish stuff like that. And Scott, of course, counters that we don't learn from the past. Hank says, have you ever tried to learn from these idiots? Sometimes you've got to let the kids follow their instincts and hope for the best. Scott is rational, Hank is right. That's the eternal conflict between them. Yeah.
Oh, I was just wondering, in Exiles, do you just come up with an idea and like, oh, it would be so cool if they did this or the universe of this, or do you pay attention to old what ifs and say, oh, I like this and that universe, and pay attention to the continuity of that? Just kind of
More the first than the second, simply because, to me, that we've done the what ifs, those what ifs means we've already touched on those universes. It would be better to show something new. Look, I'd like to go back and do a deeper story about the What If X-Men universe that I created, where Kitty seems to be bald, and Colossus is a lieutenant in the Russian, no longer Soviet, Red Army. Though the way Russia's going, by the time I get around to it, it might be the Red Army all over again. Where Charles and Magneto are teamed up. So I would love to go back to that universe, that concept, and play with it. And it feels so silly saying it like this. We only have 16 issues a year. And you'd be amazed how quickly they fill up. I mean, if I let myself go, I'd have this book plotted through 10 and possibly 2010 or 2012. But there's no way in God's green earth that Marvel is going to pay for any of that. It's like the money guys tend to have spasms when. How many issues ahead are you? 6. You're 6 issues ahead. Yeah, we're trying to keep the book from being late, but that means we've paid for 6 issues that haven't seen print yet, and that's a problem, dude. That's like $250,000.
Would there be any chance that, if they didn't see print, but would they consider putting them online, like for a subscription or something?
No, they want to earn money off of them. Bill Jemis and I got into a huge fight 8 years ago. Come in. I'm trying to think of what could be thumping like that. It's like, are they throwing people against the wall? We don't like your book! Boom! Okay. It doesn't like you either. But, contractually speaking, I was supposed to write 2 issues a month. But they never gave me the second book. So they just said, oh, write write Extreme. Just get ahead on Extreme. Okay. So I'm writing Extreme, and suddenly someone notices that I'm on issue 14 and the book hasn't even come out yet. Which was the essence of the conversation. It's like, you've written and vouchered and been paid for 12 complete issues. And I said, yeah, so? Which was probably not the most tactful thing to say, considering that 8 months earlier I'd been management. And he said, but the first issue hasn't even come out yet. Suppose we cancel the book with the second issue. And then with a gift for interpersonal relationships with people who pay the bills that is unparalleled in this industry, and believe me, we have real buttheads in this industry. I said, so what? It's not like I did it on my own. I was approved. And Bill didn't seem to appreciate the logic. There was much yelling and screaming by him. It's not good when you're technically an employee and the president of the company is yelling and screaming at you. So we worked it out, but it was like, duh. Duh, you used to be management. Don't you understand? Well, yeah, but I'm not management anymore. I'm an employee. Duh! So, it sounds funny now, but at the time it was like, we were so talented in our disagreements, we could have been Republicans. Well, I said talented, I could have said inept, but that would have made me really Republican, but that's too political a statement. You guys have had your primaries, right? Who won?
It doesn't count.
It doesn't count.
Oh, that's right, you're the Hillary state. Oh, yeah, well, it will count,
Well, Romney won the Republican nomination.
Who?
Mitt Romney.
Who?
And to appeal the Michigan voters.
What?
Mint.
Mint. How can anybody go through life with a name like Mint? I mean, I couldn't get that past a comic book editor, for crying out loud. Mint. I mean, sorry, it's just silly. This is auditions for Comedy Central. What can I say? Are there any rational questions? So before I make a complete fool of myself, yes. Actually, I'm way beyond that line.
I'm not sure if you've really addressed this before, and I don't know if you want to talk about it, but I've always wondered...
On camera? Oh, yeah.
I've always wondered what the reasons that you left X-Men back in 92 or 91.
The editor and the artist wanted the book to go in one direction. The writer wanted the book to go in the other. The artist was Jim Lee, who was about as hot as you could get. The writer thought that 16 and a half years on the best-selling book in the industry allowed for a certain measure of empathy and how should we say, chops. And one of them turned out to have made a fundamental mistake in their assessment. And that led to a splitting of the walking away. It happens, you know. People turn out to be not as smart as they think they are. Circumstances turn out to go in ways you don't expect them. There were forces at Marvel that felt it was time for a change, that the company had been locked too long into one person's vision of this concept, and it was time to spread it around to newer, perhaps fresher views. Artists always seem to be a lot more impressive to editors than writers. Maybe it was time. But that was like 16 years ago. And, you know, it's old news. It's way past time to move on. Yeah.
I was wondering, have you ever been approached or thought about maybe writing like screen movie?
No, you got a contract?
X-Men. No.
I was.
If you could, which story arc would you try?
One that hasn't been done before. One that nobody's seen. One that's really good.
Did you like any of the movies?
Yeah, I loved them all. God Loves would be fun, but I don't think it would
Wasn't
probably.
that the second one?
Loosely, but not really.
God Loves? No. It was sort of in that direction. I mean, it was Stryker, but it wasn't the story. You know, the problem is that movies are a West Coast thing. I'm an East Coast person. It'd be fun to say, let's split the difference and, you know, meet in Chicago or even Ohio, or Michigan even. But you know, sometimes those kind of trains move out and you're left behind. It happens, or not. You know, there's still time. But I'd like to think of it in terms of I'd rather come up with something original that's mine to entice people than just keep going back to the X-Men. And more to the point, much to Marvel Studios' intense frustration, Fox owns the rights completely. And not only, I mean, Fox has no problem doing a Wolverine movie if they can get it out before everybody goes on strike again. They love the idea of that. They're certainly willing to entertain the idea of Halle Berry doing a Storm movie. No way in hell do they want to do an X-Men movie. I mean, we have 3 films that collectively have done $1.5 billion worth of income worldwide. You would think that any studio with half a brain would be jumping up and down to get a 4th film in production, as Sony's trying to do with Spidey. But from Fox's point of view, it's too expensive. By the time you end up with the 3rd film, you had a dozen major X characters who needed dialogue. And that doesn't even count the walkthroughs like Colossus. Plus a dozen, if not more, villains for Magneto to team up with. Plus Magneto, plus people, gratuitous extras like the President of the United States. Yes, I'm a gratuitous extra. I run the country, but, you know. It's like, whoever thought the President would be like just a cameo? Twice in each film. But Fox felt there were just too many bodies. You couldn't focus in on anything. If they treated X3 the way I think everyone wanted it to be treated, and the way in our heart of hearts it deserved after X2, you would have had a 2.5-hour, 3-hour movie with more speaking parts than Lord of the Rings, and that's saying quite a lot. You know, Fox that was impractical. So to them, X-Men is not as a concept is not does not seem to be a viable way to go, but they're not about to let any of the characters loose because, God forbid, they return them to Marvel and Marvel makes an Iron Man quality movie in terms of both the film as a film and the film as a dramatic success, as an economic success. Iron Man was very good, even if I could pick Nitsa at it for, you know, a half hour. But I would love to see the same kind of film with Kitty. I'm prejudiced, what can I say? Or Kitty Beast. No, I'm serious. Kitty and the, you know, I mean, Beauty and the Beast, Kitty and the Beast. With, you know, with Wolverine. What the hell? You know? Think of the possibilities. And then, you know, we'll throw in Cecilia Reyes to give him, you know, some romance. It could be, that could be a lot of fun. You know. But we'll just have to do it in Exiles. That way we can have an unexpected ending where people could get married or die or turn out to be villains. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of yours, and also I'm a Republican. But my question to you is...
It's all right. So was I a long time ago.
My question to you is, when you work with an artist on a comic book, do you bounce ideas off of each other, or is there one person who takes the lead and you just take ideas as they come?
Depends on the artist. Depends on the comic. People may have heard this before. When Frank Miller and I were plotting the Wolverine miniseries, Frank didn't want to do it. I had to sell him on it. Fortunately, I ended up giving him a lift from the San Diego Comic-Con to Mark Evaniers' house in Los Angeles. And INS decided to do a snap search of northbound vehicles on I-95. So it took us what is normally a 2.5-hour trip. It took us 5 hours just to get past San Onofre, the nuclear plant. So I was able to pitch the story, and he liked it. The first plot I sent him was one of my standard plots. It was 22 pages of typed material for a 22-page comic. I tend to override even when I'm writing plots. The fourth issue plot was a 40-minute phone call and a 1-page bullet point, 1-page memo with bullet points. Wow, could be Frank. Telling me I'm wrong. Hello? Hello? Hi, this is Diane. I'm calling to see if you need your carpet professionally cleaned. Well, thank you. The fucking cell phone! What is in these brownies? They do taste a little funny. No wonder everybody likes to go to this con. Where was I? Sorry, I've lost track.
Talk about Frank Miller.
Oh, Frank Miller, sorry, yeah. The full script, what I'm doing now, for Tom Grummett, I do plots. So I break the book down into pages. I give him what's happening on each page. I throw in dialogue where I think it's necessary, and I let it go. But even that runs 11 pages. But Tom only does 12 issues a year. For the other 4 issues, which are generally sent to Spanish artists, I do full scripts. Full scripts can run 40, 50 pages. The problem is you have to gauge how much information the artist needs in order to tell the story. if it's someone I know, if it's someone who knows me, if it's a Rick Leonardi or a Salvador LaRocca or a Jim Lee or a John Byrne or a Frank Miller, you can sketch it out. I mean, they know me, they know the stories, they know the characters. It's a matter of finding the right emotional and physical elements and then figuring out, hey, this would be cool, let's try this. Why not go here? Why not go there? For a full script, when you're writing a full script for especially a foreign artist, it's one of those perverse double-edged swords, because on the one hand I'm writing everything I think the artist needs, which is probably way too much. And then his agent is translating it. So I'll be writing a 10-paragraph essay on what the X-Mansion looks like, and he's translating it into 2 sentences of Spanish that's basically said, "This is the X-Men's mansion. Look at these issues." And I'll get it back, and it's like, oh. And that's it. It's in the old days, I'm using those phrases, when you could guarantee generally that Mark Silvestri will be on the book for 3 years, or Jim Lee, or John Byrne, then what you do is the first couple of issues are maybe heavily plotted, heavily detailed, because you're trying to give the artist a sense of the world, especially if I've been on the book for a while and they haven't, of the world I'm describing, the characters as individuals, what their rooms look like. Billy Tan we were talking about this on the way in. When I sent him for his 3 issues of Uncanny that he did, the second half of End of Grays, rather. What astonished him was that I gave him a detailed description of Kitty and Rachel's room. Kitty's side is a moderate mess. There's a computer half constructed over here because she's taking it apart and putting it back together. And there are pictures up here of these are the pictures. Rachel's side of the room is boxes. Why is it boxes? Because she hasn't unpacked. Why hasn't she unpacked? Because she doesn't know if she wants to be here. And bear in mind, she's just buried her entire family. She's not feeling terrifically like home folks. She hates the fact that she's back in Exile Central. That she's in the ghetto. And he was amazed that a writer would go to such detail. But from my point of view, is I'm trying to give the artist a sense of my sense of who these people are as people. They don't just live in a room. They live in a room that is a reflection of their personality, as all, hopefully, our rooms are. And you put these pieces together, and you hope the reader, when looking at it, will say, "Oh, God, she's as messy as I am," or "not as messy as I am," or "My cousin does his room like that," or "Hey, this is cool. Look at the stuff she's got on her wall," or "God, Rachel hasn't unpacked her boxes yet. Why is that? Oh, she must be." You try and draw linkages between the characters and the audience, so that from those linkages you will establish the foundations of an ongoing relationship. You make friends.
That's why X-Men was so successful.
Well, and hopefully will be again if anybody gets their act together. And hopefully, but in my sense of the word, the frustration in a way of Exiles is the Crystal Palace being sort of the center of the universe. They don't have as much access up till now to tchotchkes and stuff and personalization. So I came up with a scene that we're still arguing about in-house, that Gambit and Mystic go scuba dive. Well, Mystic scuba diving, and Gambit swimming underwater. And as they're swimming underwater in this apparently desolate sea, suddenly there's plant life along the floor of the ocean. And as they watch, the plants grow. And suddenly there are little fish. And then the fish grow bigger fish. And all of a sudden, in the space of a page, because this being a 22-page book, we have to move fast, there is life in the oceans. Well, we've said time and again, the Crystal Palace is alive, and it takes its life, the cues of its life, from the personalities of those and the realities of those who live in it. So if you're there long enough, it starts to remake itself to make it more simpatico to you. So yes, there may be a desert in one floor, but if you go to the next floor, there's a forest. And if you're in there long enough, there might be animals in the forest and creatures. Maybe not intelligent, i.e. people you can talk to, though you never know. But it is a living organism. It wants to be compatible and hospitable to its residents. Because to me, that seems like a cool and logical thing to play with. Still trying to talk the editors into agreeing with me, but that's part of the thought process. You try to make the school a real, accessible place. So in Gen X, we have moments where they're hanging out in the library, hanging out in the dining hall, hanging out in the coffee shop in town that they all like to hang out in. Recognizable, definable places that the reader can look at and say, oh, I know that, I do that. I take that kind of bus. We throw things at each other in school. If you make it more real, if you make the as-if reality more real, then what happens to the characters, even if they're fantastic, have a real foundation, because you're saying their lives are a lot like mine, except for the superhero part. Gee, if I had superpowers, I'd be like them. Cool. It creates bonding. And the problem I feel is that I read Superman, I read Batman, I read Spider-Man. I don't see anything to link with. I don't see anything that speaks to me as an individual, or to me as a resident of a city, of a place. I hope now that the X-Men are moving to San Francisco, that when they get there, it will significantly reflect San Francisco. It'll make it alive. I do not, for the life of me, understand this issue where they're walking around looking like Mardi Gras puppets. But I'll read it and maybe it'll all become clear. Just glancing through the issue, it's kind of like, are we in time travel now? But that's, people probably were as confused about half the stories I did. Yeah.
We were talking about working with different artists. Is there one in particular that you worked with you thought you had a real connection with, a really good team?
I could say yes, but then I'd have to qualify. I mean, I've said this before many times, but it's no less true. How do you choose between John Byrne and Neil Adams and Salvador La Roca and Frank Miller? I mean, they're all top-notch artists. Jim Lee and Mark Silvestri. They all bring different strengths and different weaknesses. They all bring assets and liabilities, but they are all fundamentally, positively A-plus list people. Choosing with them is it's like a guy sitting across the table from you and your wife saying, so who's your favorite girlfriend before you got married? Yeah, right. Tell me another one.
Was there anybody you haven't worked with that you would really like?
Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko.
Well, he's still alive, isn't he?
Ditko?
Yeah.
I don't think so. My memory could be wrong, but Joe Kubert, but I don't work for DC. He doesn't work for anybody else. There are scores of people I love to work with, but you play the hand you get. I'm working with a brilliant artist now in France on a 3-part graphic series for France that's historical fantasy. Phil Briones. He did some work for DC last year, and he's absolutely superb. Unfortunately, to read it, you'll have to read French, but it's a good story. Yeah.
What would you like? What's your like? I've read a lot of your X-Men stuff, but I haven't really read much of anything else by you. What would be a good route to go?
Exiles?
Well, I'm reading Exiles. I still
Gen
consider
X?
that an X book. It's still an X book. Is there anything out of the X domain that you are particularly proud of that you've written?
Black Dragon
Black Dragon.
by me and John Bolton. Murata the She-Wolf by me and John Bolton. Wanderers when it comes out. The Superman Wonder Woman was a lot of fun. That's as good a place to start as any. Yeah.
How much does current events influence your writing? Like, does it at all?
It depends on the circumstances. Bearing in mind, I'm plotting books that won't be on sale till New Year's. So even if I see something today that I feel is that inspires a primal response, it'll be 6, 7, 8 months before it comes out. It's all part of the current events. Is very much an aspect of it. The trick is to not get so locked into it that the reader won't know what you're talking about when it or won't care when you come out. I mean, the sad thing is that many of the things I was writing about 20 years ago, which grew out of Vietnam, turn out to be just as valid today, growing out of Iraq. In some ways worse. So what you sort of try and do is balance the external events of the current events, so to speak, with the ongoing emotional realities of the characters within themselves and within their interactions with others. It's not even so much the events themselves, but how the characters choose to react to them. One of the things I've been thinking about is how do the Exiles feel about the fact that in a way they're dilettantes. They come in, they solve a problem, they leave, and they never go back. I'd like to do a story where they go back. That's partly why I left so many loose ends in Gambit's world, because in my vision, I don't know if I don't know how the editors or the publisher will feel about it, but in my vision, I'd like to go back and see what happens next in Gambit's world, not leave a loose end. Discover that solving one problem merely opens the path to the revelation and the necessity to deal with another problem, and that it's an ongoing process. That you can't, even though the publishing structure is everything has to be bundled in 6-issue bumps so that we can wrap it all into a nice, neat trade paperback, the life isn't like that. The things that happen on Monday may have an effect on Friday, may have an effect a year from now or 10 years from now, and you suddenly wake up and think, holy, did I do that? I should have done that. Oh. that's life. And the challenge and frustration in terms of writing, especially writing comics, is that you are both the arbiter of their destiny and the prisoner of it. You've got to play fair with the characters and the audience, even as you drive them crazy. Yeah.
I have a question with Gambit. Big fan. I'm just wondering if, when you created him, if you kind of thought he would be just another mutant, or did you know that he would take off in popularity the way he did?
You never know. I could have wished for a better costume. But Jim, it was Jim, so who cared? He was originally designed to be a villain. But bear in mind, I also created him thinking I was going to be around for another 10 years, not 10 months. And the directions he was taken after I left, and the revelations about Sinister that occurred after I left, were so antithetical to the conception that it just rendered both character and concept, from my perspective as a creator, basically irrelevant. So the Gambit I'm writing in Exiles is actually, emotionally speaking, structurally speaking, a lot more faithful to the Gambit I had in mind when I started, except that his dad isn't a villain. And we'll see where it goes. But
all the red eyes wasn't planned.
the what?
Gambit has red eyes, so it's Sinister.
Sinister is a 10-year-old boy. Sinister is the kid in the orphanage where Cyclops was raised. That he and Cyclops were good friends when Scott was a kid. The whole point of Sinister is that the boy, his alter ego, part of his mutant power is that he has a lifespan of 1,000 years, but he ages in normal terms. So he's not going to hit puberty until close to 250. He's going to be really pissed. But no one's going to take orders from a 10-year-old. So he built himself an alter ego, a fearsome, strong, powerful, commanding villain. But bear in mind, he's still 10 years old. So he called him Mr. Sinister. And he wears armor, and he's got paint and diamonds in his hair, and he looks like a cool 10-year-old. I mean, go back and look at artists' sketchbooks of stuff they drew when they were 12, and you will find Mr. Sinister, or variations of it. That's why he looks like such a goof. Sorry. And then when I discovered, yes, he's really a 19th century geneticist, I was like, oh, for God's sake. How cliche can you get? I mean, the point is to play against the type. I mean, it may have been a dumb idea. It may not have worked. We may have looked at it in 3 or 4 years and said, Chris, what were you thinking? But at the time, it seemed fun. And it was something that hadn't been done before. So I went with it. So looking at it from that context, Sinister / that was the whole point, is that Sinister cloned Gambit to be a grown-up version. This is what Sinister will look like when he's 18. Now he can go out and get the girl. But then the stupid guy developed independence. I mean, I create an organic robot to be my alter ego, and he rebels? Oh, this isn't fair. Therein lies the conflict between the original Sinister and Gambit. Gambit's the one that got away. How dare you go out and have fun that I can't have? And I have to look at it. See, to me, it was all sorts of fun, Oedipal young brother or older sibling kind of take that, you swine. And it could have been both dramatic and a little bit funny, silly, which I figured, this is comics, why not? Instead, it turned into something completely different. So they get, and that's what it is now. It's been around for far too long, and I'm not there in any position to put it back, except in Exiles, where I can make it up all over again and do it right, or what I thought was right. And if it works, it works, and if it doesn't work, we'll just leave that world and not come back. Yeah.
Okay, I was wondering, because, okay, so you've worked on, X-Men for like 30 years now, so you've worked along like other writers, and so that you're writing Extreme, and Morrison's doing his shit, and I'm assuming it seems that you still read the other X-Men, so what do you think of something like that? Do you think like, whoa, why didn't I think to do this at some point? Or, whoa, he's fucking up, but I just spent my life working on it, or like...
No, I don't read the other X-Men.
You don't read the other X-Men?
It's not in any way a judgment of quality or of the skill of the writers. It's just, it's not what I particularly like. And I have not yet seen stories that jump up and say, hey, this is cool, read me. But that's, you keep looking at the books until you find something. I mean, that's always been the case and always will be the case. And I assume sooner or later someone will come along with a vision of the characters and the concepts that, as Frank did with Daredevil, which you look at, I mean, I know exactly how Denny felt. Frank walks in with his first issue of Daredevil, Denny reads it, Denny O'Neil, who at that time had been in the business for about 30 years and was a comic book god, and he had written Batman and everything else, and now he's an editor at Marvel, and Frank comes in and shows him, and he's editing Daredevil, and he walks down to Shooter's office, throws the script down on Jim's desk, and curses for like 3 or 4 minutes, solid. Jim's sitting there, what's the matter? And Denny is basically trying to say in very short, fundamental terms, I've been in this business 20 years, I work at it hard, I'm good. And this son of a bitch walks in and with his first fucking issue he nails it. Pardon my French. And that's what happens. You see somebody who is that gifted and that good, and it doesn't matter that you're gifted and good. What you see is, why can't I be that good? The fact that you are that good, you're just different, doesn't really enter into it. It's just like, you're flabbergasted. And he can draw too, which is really annoying. And if it turns out if he's half as good a director as he is a writer, I'm going to be so pissed. But again, that's the nature of reality. The fun part about those days at Marvel was no matter how good I thought I was on X-Men, Frank would turn in an issue of Daredevil, and I'd read it and I'd think, oh man, I wish I'd done that. So then I'd go home and try and figure out how to beat him, or do something better. Well, I don't think Frank even gave a one-shot thought about me, per se. But the point is, you read, you measure yourself by the quality of your work as it relates to the quality of the work that you respect and love. And that becomes the benchmark. And it's a case of, well, if he can do that, I can do that. And you aim to do better. And even if you don't quite succeed, the fact that you're still aiming to do better makes you better. And then an issue later, and then Frank goes on and does, Batman, and it's like, okay, now I can really go. So you want to be challenged. You want to get, but you want each issue to be exciting and unique on its own accord, but especially to be better than the one before, and better than the one after it to be better than this one. You always want to keep moving, and you always want to keep growing, and you always want the audience coming back for more. Otherwise, what's the point? We're running probably way over the end. Sorry to have been blabbing for so long. Are there any last questions? Anything? Anyone? You guys are so. Where? Come on. Yes.
Any fun writer's block stories?
What?
Having writer's block. Have you ever had writer's block when you're in the middle of working on anything, and how did you get around it?
What? When I was young, I watched my bank account dwindle. I sat at my desk and stared at my typewriter. This is before computers, ladies and gentlemen. I would watch too much bad TV. I would drink way too much Coca-Cola. I would think about going for a walk in the park next to my apartment. I would not, because it was too much effort. And I would not answer the phone when the office called. I wrote this in a story once with Storm. And eventually you get better. Or you run out of money in the bank and you have to get better. Now, oddly enough, with kids in school and a mortgage and a wife who takes care of the finances, all of those responses get compressed into about a 30-second beat. Somewhere between the top floor and the bottom floor, as I'm carrying the dog, the puppy, he's too young to walk down the stairs.
What kind of puppy?
He's
What'd you name it?
Cinco. Beth named it. Cinco. He's a boxer. Not a boxer, No, he's actually, God, he's purebred. It's very odd. Jesus, never mind, I'll remember in about 3 hours. But he's going to be 65 pounds when he grows up. But he's only, they release him, 8 weeks old. He's this little baby, itty bitty thing. Now he's like this big itty bitty thing. And you got to carry him down the stairs because he doesn't know how to do stairs. And take him out and have him pee and, play with him and everything else. But that's when you have your writer's block. And by the time breakfast is finished and the kids are off to school and you get up to the computer now, no more foolishness, you got to start working. Because the mail's coming in 4 hours and you don't want to look at the letters that have, bank on them, or school, or federal government. But that's life. In the 21st century. Were we supposed to have flying cars? Don't I remember, there were traffic jams over LA and Marty McFly was just, gee, prof! DeLoreans. Yeah, DeLoreans. I remember those. If he only knew. Okay, if I guess that we're pretty much out of time, unless there's one more really spectacular question. Okay.
Did any of your characters you created ever amaze you? That you created them, you didn't think they go very far, but then just blew up popularity-wise? Maybe a villain or something that amazed you.
A lot we thought were successful crashed and burned faster than a speeding bullet.
They go that route more.
Oh yeah, I figured I'd be on my 100th issue of Sovereign 7 by now. Yeah, well. Some planes fly. Some planes make it into the air. Some planes just get to the end of the runway and think they're a car. Or even worse, a submarine, and they can't tell the difference between water and earth. Oh. So Sovereign were sort of down, sinking like a stone. It was a great idea that didn't quite work, but that's life. Anyway, thank you for coming. If you guys want any comics needing signed, I guess I'm heading back to the table, and I'll be here tomorrow. And feel free to come by and talk and ask any questions and complain. I'll try my best to be coherent. Current examples to the contrary. We thought he was. I mean, that's what we invented him as Wolverine's dad, John and I. So we figured he'd have a good future. We didn't, you don't expect the iteration. I mean, but in that context, I thought I'd still be writing a book.
I like the way they played that out in the Wolverine series. Kept saying that he was his father.
Yeah, except that he's not, according to Wolverine, which really ticks me off. But, the writer's opinions are not the owner's opinions, so that's the way it goes.